This is Cole, Disability Rights South Dakota again. Today we're going to be talking about various bills that affect people with disabilities that are being heard currently at the South Dakota House of Representatives, the South Dakota Senate, and their respective committees. You see here a list of the different bills we're going to be talking about. The first one that we're going to discuss, House Bill 1010. This is to repeal the sunset date for provisions related to the licensure of behavior analysts. This one has been referred to House Health and Human Services and is scheduled for hearing on January 17th, room 412, 7:45 to 9:45. What does this do? It just removes a sunset provision for the statute so that the provision related to licensure of behavior analysts will continue on beyond July 1, 2024. The next bill, House Bill 1014, update provisions related to the licensure of speech-language pathologists and speech-language pathology assistants. Sometime back, there was a change in the law that required a certain level of certification to provide these services. While there were individuals that were practicing in this area that hadn't reached that level of certification, this bill would allow those individuals to continue to provide services to a limited extent, but be able to basically be grandfathered in. This has been scheduled for hearing as well with the House Health and Human Services Committee, room 412, January 17th, 7:45 to 9:45. Next, we have House Bill 1034, modified tax refund for elderly persons and persons with a disability, to make an appropriation therefor, and to declare an emergency. What does this do? This provides, sets up an account or a fund of $450,000 to provide refunds to elderly and disabled persons for real property tax and sales tax. If you qualify, you can petition or apply for a refund. This bill also increases the income limits for eligibility to receive these funds. This has been referred to the Joint Committee on Appropriations. Not yet scheduled. House Bill 1037. Amend the eligibility for admission to the state's Veterans Home and repeal residency requirement. This too has been referred. It's been referred to the House Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. No hearing has yet been set. This makes it so that you can be eligible for services from the State Veterans Home. It's basically a language cleanup, but it does, instead of requiring that you be a South Dakota resident to be eligible, now it just provides a preference for South Dakota residents. House Bill 1044, make an appropriation to fund scholarships for individuals entering the behavioral health field. This is to incentivize students, young people who are going into that area, that career field. That sets up a $20 million appropriation to the Department of Health to provide scholarships to students pursuing behavioral health careers and support individuals entering the behavioral health field. Participants who want to be awarded this scholarship must enter into the behavioral health field. They work in South Dakota for an amount of the years that they received that scholarship plus 1 year. So if they can meet those terms, they may be eligible for significant scholarships to enter that work. This has been referred to the House Health and Human Services Committee, not yet scheduled. House Bill 1046, to provide free tuition at Board of Technical Education Institution or tech schools for children or spouses of members of the South Dakota National Guard who are disabled or deceased in the line of duty. This adds tech schools to the already available free tuition from South Dakota universities. This has been referred to the House Military and Veterans Affairs Committee, not yet scheduled. House Bill 1052 changed the eligibility requirements of a property tax relief program for disabled veterans and surviving spouses. What does this do? It reduces the eligibility threshold for these property tax relief programs. Used to be that you had to be 100% permanently and totally disabled. Now you can qualify if you have a rating of at least 70% or more. This has been referred to the House Committee on Taxation. House Concurrent Resolution 6002. The thing to remember about the thing to remember about resolutions is that they are not binding. They're just a suggestion or a statement made. In this case, the House Health and Human Services is encouraging the Executive Board of Legislature to continue researching childhood mental health and mental health services available to children in this state. This has been referred to the House Health and Human Services Committee, not yet scheduled. Again, another resolution, non-binding, to encourage the Executive Board of the Legislature to authorize the interim legislative study of long-term care services for veterans, regardless of disability ratings, and to develop long-term care plans for VA-operated, purchased, and subsidized long-term services. This has been scheduled for hearing at the House State of Affairs. This will be heard first on Wednesday, January 18th in room 414, 7:45 to 9:45 a.m. Senate Bill 1. Now we're moving over to Senate committees. Senate Bill 1 is to modify debilitating medical conditions for medical cannabis use. Previously, it was up to the South Dakota Department of Health to maintain a list of qualifying conditions, medical conditions, for which you could receive a medical cannabis card. What this bill is to do is to define a certain list of conditions that you may, if you were to have that, you would qualify to apply for and receive a medical cannabis card. So it also removes the option for individuals to petition the State Department of Health to have their particular condition added to that list. So, well, again, what this does is provide a defined list of conditions to be eligible or qualify for a medical cannabis card. This has been referred and scheduled. It will be heard January 18th in room 412 before the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, 7:45 to 9:45 a.m. Senate Bill 2, Revised Department of Corrections reporting requirements concerning abuse, neglect of individuals in a private contracted facility. This has been referred to the Senate Judiciary Committee. It was in fact heard before that committee, and it passed the committee unanimously. So what that means is that it will go to the Senate floor, go on the consent calendar, and if nobody pulls that off of the consent calendar, it will be passed by the Senate in a batch of other bills on the consent calendar to then be sent over to the House for consideration. So, if you're interested in this bill and you'd like to discuss it, it's not too late. Once it goes over to the House, you'll have an opportunity to participate in that process on that item. What does it do exactly? It's just a language cleanup. But it does define the date by which the Secretary of the Department of Corrections should provide a report to the Government Operations and Audit Committee. The Secretary of DOC must do so no later than July 31st of each year. Senate Bill 4 modifies the court's authority to commit habitual juvenile offenders to the Department of Corrections. This has been read and referred to the Senate Judiciary Committee. This adds language that says that under certain circumstances, a child or juvenile may be referred to the Department of Corrections or Juvenile Justice Center if that child is previously adjudicated delinquent for separate delinquent acts arising out of separate and distinct episodes 3 or more times within the preceding 6-month period. So if this is an ongoing issue this kid is having in terms of behaviors that are unrelated, but they happen in close succession, conceivably that could result in placement at JDC. Not yet scheduled for hearing. Senate Bill 6. This is to authorize community response teams to recommend alternative community-based resources for children alleged to be delinquent and children alleged to be in need of supervision prior to adjudication. So essentially what this means is to set up response teams or interdisciplinary teams to help to find other resources available for kids that might be in trouble other than sending them to JDC, the Juvenile Detention Center. This, too, has been referred to the Senate Judiciary Committee. They passed it unanimously. It went to the Senate, and it there was placed on the consent calendar and passed without objection. It will be sent over to the House in due time. Keep an eye out for that. Senate Bill 7. This clarifies emergency commitments of severely mentally ill persons by appropriate regional facilities. Previously, people that were in mental health distress would go to a hospital. Now this bill is to clean up the language so that it add, in addition to hospitals, appropriate regional facility. So if somebody goes on a mental health hold, not only can they go to the hospital, they can go to appropriate mental health facility, appropriate regional facility. Thing to keep in mind is there's also a state statute that says if there's not a hospital available, if there's not an appropriate regional facility available, or they're all full, that in those instances, a person could be put on a mental health hold in a jail, in a county jail. So that's something to keep in mind and be concerned about. This has been referred to the State Judiciary Committee, not yet been scheduled for hearing. Senate Bill 9, modified discharge notice procedures applicable to the developmentally disabled persons. This refers to individuals who are voluntarily placed at the South Dakota Developmental Center in Redfield by their parents or guardians. Previously, prior to discharge, that parent or guardian had to receive notice of the intent to discharge within 10 days. Now, this language cleanup essentially brings us into alignment with federal rule, which states that when somebody is either to be transferred or discharged from a facility such as the developmental center, the parent or guardian must be provided a reasonable time to prepare the client and his or her parents or guardian for the transfer or discharge. So it went from 10 days required notice to a reasonable time to prepare that individual for transfer or discharge. This is good news. Sometimes it takes more than 10 days, and this way, if they're not prepared within 10 days, it gives them longer, should that be reasonable. Shorter, if these supports can be put into place prior to that 10-day period. So it's really based on that individual's needs as opposed to some timeline that's been laid out in law. Senate Bill 10 expands certification options for interpreters for the deaf. This is referred to the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, not yet been scheduled. This expands the certifications required to provide interpreter services, ASL services in the state. This is, as far as I know, been widely accepted by providers and the communities alike. This hopefully will expand the number of interpreters that are available to provide services in South Dakota. Senate Bill 28, revise and repeal obsolete provisions related to the Department of Social Services. That's language cleanup. That's been referred to Senate Judiciary. Senate Bill 37, revise provisions pertaining to the South Dakota School for the Deaf. Also language cleanup, but it also expands, updates and expands background checks for certain positions at the School for the Blind and Visually Impaired and for services for the deaf. The facility used to be called South Dakota School for the Deaf. Now it's called South Dakota Services for the Deaf, so it just changes the verbiage to reflect the current name of the program. That's been read and referred to the Senate Education Committee, not yet been scheduled for hearing. Senate Bill 64, repeal provisions related to the jail mental health screening pilot program and oversight council. This is an interesting one. At Disability Rights South Dakota, we're tracking this particular bill, trying to determine just what it purports to do. We're not sure if it's removing certain reporting requirements of the Oversight Council to the Department of Social Services. It seems that it is, but it's unclear if this merely removes those reporting requirements or eliminates mental health screening pilot program altogether, or screenings for mental health issues at jails altogether. It's our intention to follow up on this particular bill to see just what its goal is, what the intent of this bill is. We'll be following up with Senator Duhamel, who's the prime sponsor on this bill. It's not yet been read in or referred to a committee, so of course then it's not been scheduled for hearing. So we have a little time to try to just figure out just what's going on with this bill. If you have any questions over any of the legislative bills that we've covered today, give me a call at Disability Rights South Dakota. We'd be happy to talk about what's in these bills, what the status of the legislation is, how you might become involved with contacting your respective legislator to talk about your concerns, or go to the Capitol to listen to the committee hearings on these topics, participate to provide testimony before the committees. We can help you to navigate all those processes. Additionally, if you have any suggestions or comments on these videos, ways that we can make them better and more useful to you, please also reach out, give me a call or email. We'll try to put out another video next week to give you an update on what's going on with these bills up at the Capitol. Until then, thank you.